Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and with me, as always, is Derek Cohen. He's our Chief of Research here. All right, Derek, special session next week. Are you ready for it?
Well, not as ready as Jerome and Andrew have to be, but, we're kind of working on the whole getting... I hate to say this out loud, but getting together for the 90th legislature. We're kind of in the thick of that as well. So just making
sure past the special session, that's already done. In your mind, you're already ready for the 90th.
You never play past your opponent, as you well know, being a Texas fan. But
no, the last 10 years. We've
I was about to say, as a Michigan fan, I've been put in my place recently. So, but all that to say is, yeah, I think we're in a good footing. My responsibilities are more for that particular thing than on the special session. Though, as we've talked last week, though, we're going to have an interesting special session, to say the least.
Lots of stuff on the call, and there is a big push from TBPF and others. Our big issue is, property taxes, of course. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is on the call, and so there's a big effort that's getting organized right now to make a big push for that, as well as, of course, recognizing and addressing the flooding issues and infrastructure issues. Those are all going to be really, really important topics. And speaking of topics, right here at the top, we always like to do something topical and fun and interesting. This one's less fun, but I did want to get your take on, we're not going to talk about the Epstein thing. We're not going to get into all of the details. Everybody who's probably watching the show knows more than we do probably about a lot of this stuff.
But they already got to you too.
They did. Yeah. I've already received my call. No, I'm definitely not an influencer that way, so I wouldn't get those calls. But I am noticing that there are still a lot of mad conservatives that even despite President Trump coming out and saying, hey, or why are we still talking about this? Let's all move on. There's a lot of conservative commentators who are not ready to move on. And so I'm less concerned about the debate, but I am concerned about the long-term effects, what this does to whether it's the MAGA movement or the conservatives in general. We're going into an election next year in which people are worried, or Republicans at least are worried about losing the House. Is this a distraction? Do you think there's some long-term effects here? Or do you think this will all be over by the summer?
Well, I was never too invested in this particular question to begin with, so I would probably call it a distraction. I do think there might be some fallout and ramifications, because if you look at the waters were being chummed by folks that were in and around the administration, talking about having lists on their desk and everything, and that's not an indictment of that, but again, when you chum the waters, sometimes the sharks show up, and that's the problem that has to be dealt with. Now, as to the item or the question itself, yeah, I've always found that just to be weird. Now, are the circumstances surrounding his death mysterious and weird? Yeah, but studying criminal justice, I can speak fairly educatedly that most circumstances surrounding deaths, notwithstanding murders, are weird in of themselves, regardless of outside involvement. But you know what? It's actually kind of funny. You know what this reminded me of? You ever watched The Wire?
Oh, yeah. Favorite show. Probably my favorite show ever.
Remember when Stringer Bell's kind of like doing the business pitch in the hotel? And he's like, what are you doing? And the kid was like writing stuff down. He's like, are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy? I think that there's a lot of that surrounding the idea of of the client list, like somebody that a person who's in charge of an international child trafficking and extortion ring is somehow taking copious notes. Yeah. And I think that in and of itself kind of engendered an expectation that I never really thought was going to come to light. And the fact that people kind of stoked that fire, I think those chickens are the ones coming home to roost.
I tend to agree with you. This is something that our pollster Scott Rasmussen calls, just noise, that this is a lot of the noise that's out there, and that the things that actually affect people's opinions on a day-to-day basis of who they're going to vote for, or whether or not the country is moving in the right or the wrong direction, are not these kinds of things. But
there are people that are legitimately mad.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And
can't discount that.
And they need those clicks, so let's get mad and let's go get some clicks.
So all that being said, Brian, is that if you were invited for the binder celebration, that you would be more enraged right now.
I would go just because it's fun to go to the White House.
That's true. That's true.
I would at least go for to steal the napkins or whatever and put them in my bathroom. All right, well, let's get to the real reason why we're here. We are super excited to have our guest Jill Tate, and this is I've got on my. You have a long bio, which I will encourage. We don't do bios here. We like to get in right into the stuff, but I will say that you do have a very extensive and very impressive bio. I've got Texas super activist on here As you don't have an official. You have a few official titles, but for me, I think you're a super activist. I want to get into your history and how you decided to become an activist. But by way of bio, you served early in your career. You served as the president of Young Conservatives for Texas, and so very early on, you had a very important leadership position. Since then, you've gone on to hold a bunch of other positions and accolades and awards. Currently, you are the precinct chair for the Tarrant County GOP, and you are more important for our discussion today, the vice president of legislation for the Texas Federation of Republican Women. So we want to get into all the policy issues that TFRW has looked at over the last session, looking forward to in the special session, and then, of course, in the years to come. But first, I want to get into, so thank you for being here with us
thanks
today.
for having me. Appreciate it.
Jill, okay, so tell us about how you first got involved in politics and how you got involved in being an activist at all. We don't usually have we have politicians, we have policy experts. We don't really have activists very much on our show. So tell us a little bit about what that's like.
So honestly, I don't remember a time in my life where I wasn't interested in policy or politics or what was happening in the world. I mean, I can remember as a kindergartner making a big red X for Ronald Reagan in, the election, the little school election we had. I can remember in high school, my history teacher having Dukakis signs up everywhere, and I had a cow about it, and she said, well, if you go get the Bush signs, I'll put them up. And she did, to all of her credit.
Yeah.
So
wouldn't happen today, probably.
Probably not, yeah.
They'd find Michael Dukakis a little too squishy.
Right, exactly. And when I went to Baylor, I thought I was going to be, at the time they called them the Baylor Bowheads.
Yeah.
I thought I would be the Baylor Bowhead, and go do the sorority thing and all that. No, that didn't interest me.
No.
It was pure continuing to be policy and that sort of thing. So I got really involved in Young Conservatives Texas and became the chapter chair, became a precinct chair, an election judge. I did all of that in college. And
what were the issues that really animated you? Was it just like the allure of politics and kind of in general, or were there specific issues that were like, I think the world needs to work on these things and I'm going to get involved?
It was a little bit of both. A lot of it's just the whole political game. I think is a lot of fun. But I was pro-life. I was low taxes, government get out of our way, strong military. All of those things meant something to me. And so I don't know that there was necessarily one thing that I can say, that we were way, really about this. There was a lot of things that I was worried about then, worried about now.
You said you marked an X for Reagan when you were in kindergarten, so I guess parents had a lot to do with some of your values set there and all that?
I got to say, I have great parents that instilled. I mean, my mom, I can remember my mom taking me to watch the legislative hearing on No Pass, No Play. I mean, that's how, I really liked this stuff. Yeah.
When Reagan gave his farewell speech in '88, that was kind of my quintessential political moment. I wasn't sure where I was. I knew politics was interesting, but I wasn't sure where I was. Right. But then I remember vividly watching that speech and being like, whatever that is, that's what I want the world to look like, and that's the vision that I think. So I think Reagan inspired a whole generation and continues to this day to inspire whole generations. Because you started so early and were so involved in this, I mean, you remember when, Democrats and Republicans used to trade statewide offices, and you had the Ann Richards into the George Bush, and you had Bullock was lieutenant governor. And so it used to be, I don't know if a purple state is right to call it in Texas, but it certainly traded off.
Well, I think to use that definition, purple had to mean the same thing, and that means both red and blue had to mean the same thing. And I don't think the blue of today is the blue of yesteryear.
No, we did have conservative Democrats. And you remember that's really why Young Conservatives of Texas was started, was because there were not just conservative Republicans, there were conservative Democrats. And so it was the motto of YCT was always policy over politics or policy over party. Because there used to be good conservative Democrats. Unfortunately, we don't necessarily see that anymore.
We do see a couple, but then they usually flip parties in short order.
They don't stay there very long.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So talk to me about how you've seen things change, because you remember the last time a Democrat was elected statewide in Texas, and it hasn't been that way since I think 1994 was the last actual election. Reagan, but then he left office in 98. So it's been over 25 years, a quarter century now. How has Texas changed during that time?
Well, I love seeing where Texas is at right now. When I first got, involved 25, 30 years ago, really within the party, we're exactly where we wanted to be. All statewide electeds, Republican, having the House, having the Senate. So it's exciting that that's where we finally are. But one of the big things that comes to mind for me is the life issue. I mean, I can remember, that wasn't a big deal at the time to say you were a pro-life candidate. It was kind of further down on the list. Now, if you're not pro-life, don't run.
Wow, yeah.
And I certainly would have never guessed in a million years we would have virtually eliminated abortion in Texas. I mean, we've got a few things that are still going to work on this session, but for the most part, we've pretty much stopped.
Do you think that it is kind of a pendulum swing from the 1970s, obviously, in the 80s and 90s, and now is that more of a pendulum swing, or do you think that conservatives have just been able to message better and to educate better on the issue, or is it some combination of that?
I think
and
it's a
other
combination of all of it, honestly. I mean, I think people also decided that they're going to be vocal on issues. We're going to be vocal and say, we don't like this. We are pro-life. Yes, we don't like the government telling us how to do things. So I think there's just there's been a lot of things change.
And if you're vocal and you win on those issues, then you sort of demonstrate to the rest of the state, hey, you can do this. And you can be conservative and be from the Valley or, all of these sacred cows that people assumed 20 years ago. It's like, no, you can have conservative representation in, West Texas and East Texas.
Well, I feel kind of bad as the lone transplant at this table. We have another one behind the cameras, but
he got here as fast as he could.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. Hey, we both did. Yep. But that being said, is to Brian's question about the seeing the kind of the drift, and a drift that, if I can characterize your argument, I'd say probably favorable.
Yeah.
But with that drift, do you find that it's animated? Because Brian made the joke, we got here as quick as we could, and I most certainly did, and it's gonna take an act of God to get me to leave. But that being said, so Texas is becoming a more conservative state. I think that's a defensible proposition. How has, in your experience, new Texans, such as myself or ones that have been here maybe, they're just starting the second generation or what have you, how has that kind of informed the character of that in it moving, again, a little bit more to the right?
I think, I've heard people say when they move here, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand. I would hear people say, I've heard, it's different in Texas. This is different. And then they get here and like, yeah, now I get it. I get it. Texans are just inherently conservative. We have family values. We have conservative values just inherently. That's how we roll. And I think when folks move here from other states, they're like, yeah, that's what I think too. Yeah, I'm now in the right place. Yeah, I think that's kind of.
And there's that baseline.
That's exactly what happened here.
Yeah.
We've done, not to your surprise, but we're a research organization. We've researched the cultural side of this to try and understand what people say when they say what it means to be Texan. And we've found certain commonalities, even amongst different political affiliations and political ideologies, that there's kind of a Texas baseline about what it means to get here. And you can have differences of agreements on the surface on the issues, and that can be really important and very different. But at the end of the day, there's things like, the cordial back and forth of the discussion or the debate, or ultimately we all kind of have this freedom-y thing that, that's all kind of based in, we expect to be able to do what we want to do.
Remember, I'd be doing Joshua Trevino a disservice if I did not mention the common element that we found that unified folks across racial, ethnic, religious backgrounds that we did that we surveyed for this project. One of the most centrally occurring themes in their, I would say, goodwill towards Texas was the Alamo.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like that.
Everybody knows the Alamo.
But that just represents a cultural touchstone that I think that summarizes the phenomenon you're talking about, Brian.
Yeah, and which is no surprise why the far radical left has attacked specifically the Alamo. They know it too. They know what that means symbolically to most Texans, and in order to push Texas in a more radical leftward way, they're going to have to attack that baseline for us, and that's why you have these idiot books like "Forget the Alamo" and trying to, the reason why the Texas Revolution happened is because we were trying to protect slavery and all this new reframing of Texas history and all of that.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think that a perfect example of Texas, their values, and how we think, we've seen just in the last couple of weeks with the tragedy in the Hill Country, because we weren't waiting around for the government to respond. People within hours were getting in their trucks, hooking up their boats, and heading down to the Hill Country.
That's right.
We weren't waiting for there to be a savior from the government. No, we take care of our own. We take care of our own. We care about our own, and we're going to take care of it. And so I think that's a big example. And
maybe you already answered the next question I had, which was, what do you think it is about Texas that makes us so resilient? Because you see this over and over again, not just with catastrophic natural disasters, but COVID. I mean, Texas was the first state to return to post-COVID job growth or post-COVID employment, which was within about 9 months of the worst parts of COVID. And so Texas has always been very resilient. It's always been a job manufacturing place. It's always attracted people from other places around the country to come here and to be part of our communities. Is there, I'm kind of asking the same question maybe I've already asked, but what's the secret sauce in Texas that makes us so resilient?
Again, I think it goes back to how we're raised in Texas, and it is, we take care of our neighbors, we care for one another, and it's kind of almost, well, I wouldn't say almost, it is biblical. In that we're not waiting for somebody else. It's not the government's job to take care of us. It's our job to take care of ourselves and take care of our neighbors. And I think that's part of Texas.
One of the things that we're trying to do to protect that is we have a restored focus on rural communities. And so we've gone out and our, under the radar, our president or CEO here took a tour of rural Texas and went and met with, mayors and stakeholders in those areas to truly try to understand what their concerns are and to see how we can translate that to action in Austin. As at TFRW, obviously you have, chapters in very rural communities and things like that. What are you seeing out there? Are they voicing those same kind of concerns about the loss of, brain drain or, losing the rural values and becoming more like, urban minded? Or are you hearing anything from the urbans in terms of rural communities in terms of their concern?
Not really. A lot of the younger generations actually are coming back to the rural communities. They get out to the big city and they go, I think I just want to go home. And I like that everybody knows each other's names and we all have the same values and share the same things. So, the thing about rural communities is they are concerned about, everyday life stuff. Do we have enough water? Do we have enough electricity? Do we, have
good schools?
Are we good schools? All that sort of stuff. And they don't get bogged down into a lot of what's happening in our urban areas where we see all of this liberal nonsense that continues to go on. You don't necessarily have a teacher trying to teach about that you're a girl instead of a boy, in a rural community school for sure. So I think there's a lot of people that just want to go back home and get out of that urban.
One of the things we talked about was like when all the riots were happening in all the places around the country in 2020 and all of that, and we have major urban centers of Dallas and Houston and San Antonio, but there's just this thing about Texas, like that stuff doesn't happen here. Like even though there are those forces and there are people that believe in those ideologies, and that at the end of the day we don't go around smashing random windows and robbing storefronts, and it's just not something we would allow in Texas, just culturally, but also we have a sense of law and order here that protects our way of life, and we just wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We know that if we're breaking into somebody's the local store down the street, that's hurting our friend Bob and Joe that own the store. You know,
right.
that we're not going to have a store if we get rid of it. You know, or riot it, or whatever. So, yeah, Texas is a different place. I saw something recently, happened to come across my Instagram feed. It was an African-American gentleman that had moved somewhere near the Dallas area. And he said he was given like the top 5 things about what you need to know about Texas when you get here. And he said things that surprised him is he said, I've never encountered racism. And he said, I expected when I moved here that would be the first thing that happened. That people don't ride horses or wear cowboy hats every day, and people are just accepting of you.
Yeah.
And he said that I wasn't expecting that when I moved to Texas. So that it actually kind of made me smile.
And that's one of the things we found in our research is that one of the major components was that Texans are very accepting of different cultures and ideas. There's a way that you can express those ideas in a way that we can talk and debate in those ideas. That's what unifies us. Right. But we don't have any problem with people with different ideas coming into our state and trying different things and having their communities work differently than other communities.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into some policy stuff. I could talk about Texas culture all day.
Yeah,
somebody's
it's
been following
stuff.
all of that. As long as you have, you're just a wealth of knowledge on what you've seen. But I do want to get into the policy stuff because we are the right idea. So let's start talking about some of those ideas. Let me just get your general thoughts on the 89th and kind of where you saw, obviously you all had an agenda at TFRW and how did that go? And what did you think of the 89th?
Okay. Well, so we were very happy with the 89th session. The 4 areas that we concentrated on going into were AI, water, energy, and school choice. And so we're thrilled. We got accomplishments in all those areas. And then we had a couple other things that we popped up, during the session that always happens that we championed as well. But I think, in my 25, 30 years of Texas politics, I have to say that the last 2 sessions in Texas have been some of the best sessions, most conservative sessions I've ever seen. And I know that that's not a popular opinion. But when I look at the last 30 years, I would have never guessed in a million years we would have gotten constitutional carry passed. Mm-hmm. I would have never guessed that we were going to virtually outlaw abortion. I would have never guessed that we would, in child mutilation. Of course, I didn't think that child mutilation, honestly, would be an issue.
Right. That was addressed almost as quickly as it cropped up.
Yes, exactly. But we got rid of that. We addressed property taxes. We gave property tax help. Is it done? No. But by gosh, we started the ball rolling on it, and we've got more. Religious liberty freedoms. We addressed election integrity issues.
Passed the largest launch of a school choice program in the history of the country.
Oh, listen, talk about something that I never thought I'd see. School choice was, of course, something huge for TFRW. We knew that was a mandate kind of by our voters, really. School choice is something, obviously, I've cared about for 30 years. Always thought it was a great idea. Why aren't we doing it? And then it hit me personally. And so it made me fight for it just a little bit harder. Public school failed my son. My son has 2 kinds of dyslexia and dysgraphia and ADHD. And he supposedly passed the dyslexia class, right? And had what we called the gift of COVID. I think education had the gift of COVID, quite frankly, because we saw so many things that was going on in education that we had no idea was happening. A literal
window through the virtual schooling. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when I sat down with my son, who had all these great grades and passed dyslexia, et cetera, he could not read and write. Literally could not read and write. And so then when we go to the school, I said, well, wait a minute. What's, this is not what's happening, when I'm sitting with him doing work. It got down to, well, he's got technology. And when I said, but my husband and both said, well, he's got to take notes. We'll give him the notes. Well, that doesn't prepare him for life. and he's still got to put a note on the refrigerator that says I'm going to be late. And, you got to be able to read and write. You can't just have the computer tell you what it says. You can't just tell the computer what to write. And so we moved him to a school that is specifically for dyslexic students. And, it's taken him 4.5 years to get caught up. And, fortunately, we could afford it. We can afford it. We can afford the extra tutors. We can afford the specialized school, all of that stuff. But I think about all the kids that don't have a friend Jill Tate to pay for that specialized school.
Right.
And those kids are being left behind. And so when we talk about school choice, it's not about, Bobby and Sally Country Club going to prep school. This is for the kids that are being left behind by our public school. And I believe in public school. I sit on the Texas State School Safety Board. I care about each and every one of our kids in this state, and I want public school to be the best it can be. But unfortunately, it cannot do all things for all students. Right. And so I think the beauty of what we passed is we're going to address the kids that need the help the most first.
And the way that you just described it is exactly when we started first doing our research on this, that was the storyline that had came up again and again and again, which was parents knew that something was going on with their kids. They're the first ones to know that they're not being educated the way that they should be. And their first thing to do is they don't just pull them out of school. Or they go to the school and they say, hey, work with me. Like, what's going on here? You're saying he's getting A's and B's when we clearly he can't read and write. That interaction, and then the interaction is, well, too bad, we don't have anything else for him, or this is what we're going to do. That moment is what created the parent empowerment movement.
Absolutely.
Because so many parents didn't have the option that you had, which was, what do I do now? I've tried to go and partner with the school to address the issues with my child, and they've told me to pound sand, or they move me up to eventually have to talk to a superintendent whose only job is there to protect the teachers and the administration. And so you don't really have any recourse. And that moment when parents realize those people that I thought were partners in the education of my child really aren't, that is, if you could bottle the parent empowerment movement, that is exactly what you described.
It absolutely is. I mean, I have a friend whose son is autistic, and they spent over $50,000 suing our school district just for her son to get the services guaranteed by law. Still wasn't getting it, and finally said, okay, we can't spend any more money on attorney's fees trying to get this. We'll just homeschool. And there are so many of those cases over and over again. The great thing I think about school choice, though, is that this is going to make our public schools better, because I believe in competition. And we know, based on Florida and other states that have done this, that the public schools get better.
They do.
Competition's good. And so I am looking forward to seeing what happens with Texas public schools, where we start addressing, especially with our neurodivergent kiddos. We know that we have 1 in 20 on the autistic spectrum. We have 1 in 5 that is neurodivergent. We have to start addressing those kids. We can't just rely on sending them to a specialized school.
Well, you'll be happy to hear that it's actually already happening, because a lot of schools can see what's coming. One of the biggest schools in the San Antonio district has already announced that they're now switching to open enrollment, which says that anybody from anywhere, if they apply and they're qualified, they can get into that school district, which is the whole purpose of all of this. This is, and then they have to essentially market their programs, because they're trying to attract more people and are widening the pool. They have to then market their programs, so they have to improve their programs. They can't attract new parents and new students by saying, half our kids can't read, and we're going to indoctrinate them with all these left-wing values. They have to change all the things that they're doing to market to more people to come in. So before the law is, before it was even in effect, or we even have a program yet off the ground, it's already starting to move schools in that direction. So
it's exciting. I'm glad. thrilled that I was there the day of the bill signing, stood on the front row with tears streaming down my face because this is good for Texas.
That's great to hear.
Derek, we have a contractual obligation to talk about school choice. Does that officially meet our?
Actually, with the
this is TVPF after all.
I think with the breadth that we gave it, I think, because I don't know if we did that last week, so I think we probably bank some credit if anything.
You mentioned was it SB 715 or HB 715? I always get it confused. The energy bill. SB 715. It was the energy bill. Energy, huge issue in Texas, huge issue across the country, but obviously because of our industry that we have here in Texas, but just because in terms of our growth and business and all that, you can't do anything. You can't light a school. You can't have a school. You can't have a business. Can't have a city or a rural community without energy. This was a big issue for you guys. Where was your angle, and what were the things that you were pushing from TFRW?
So we kind of looked at it in a broad sense. So one of the things that we did was we created an energy committee within TFRW on the state level about a year and a half ago to educate our members on the industry of energy, because in Texas, energy is the backbone of the Texas economy. Whether it's turning on your lights or making sure we have good oil and gas policy, we got to have it in Texas. Mm-hmm. And so we were looking at it from all standpoints, from yes, let's have a secure grid to make sure that the lights come on, to okay, how are we going to power the next generation of Texas? So one of the things that I was really excited we got done this session was the nuclear power agency. I mean, that's exciting because we know that, wind and solar, they're fine, but they have a 20-year lifespan. Nuclear is clean. Especially these small new modular units, we can put them up quickly. They can get onto the grid quickly, and then it expands the possibility of then looking at desalination units along the coast to help with our water issues. So it's kind of all symbiotic at the same
They're very
time
safe.
as well.
That's a big issue.
Very safe. So we kind of took energy in a big chunk, so to speak.
Yeah. We had a funny, kind of morbid, but kind of funny. We had a nuclear expert on our podcast one time, and he told us the funny stat that more people have been injured or killed installing solar panels than have ever died, in Texas from any kind of nuclear fallout or any kind of nuclear accident.
Exactly.
So very safe.
Yeah.
A couple other issues I wanted to get to. Anything on? You said AI, and so that's something we're working on that in different ways. AI, but obviously AI is linked to energy and power in that respect. What sort of nuance were you guys looking at?
So what we were doing is a couple of things. One, educating our members on AI. Like, to me, when I think of artificial intelligence, I'm like Star Trek. It's happening like 30 years from now, and it's not. It's like today. And so
it's in your pocket. It's in all of our pockets.
Yeah,
it's on top of us.
It's crazy. And my state rep is Giovanni Capriglione, and so I've listened to him numerous times, a few times on that. And what we really wanted to make sure happened, and was what we passed this session, was let's put some guardrails on this. Let's make sure that we aren't going to be going, oh, heck, we should have done X, Y, Z. And now they have all of, they're duplicating us.
You're kidding?
Out
We
there.
did that with social media and everybody turned out fine. What are you talking about?
Just fine.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, we need to put some guardrails on this. Let's continue to, AI can be a good thing, I think it'll cure cancer someday. We're using it in the Doge application in Texas. But, let's put some guardrails on it. Let's make sure we're not doing any social engineering or, duplicating us out there in some robot or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely the Google Gemini had some stumbling out of the blocks with the black and female Nazis, like the pictures of all of that. So hopefully they've cured some of that. There was an issue I wanted to bring up because it's something that I don't think a lot of people have talked about during the session, maybe didn't get as much coverage as others, but it was SB 1283, protections for our seniors in retirement communities. That was a big focus for you guys. Tell us about that issue.
It was. So this was actually brought to us by our membership. This was not something, when the board sat down and we're looking at these broad issues, talk about big things, water, and energy, this was actually brought to us by our membership. In the mid-2000s, there was a serial killer in the Dallas, Collin County areas that was going into senior living facilities, and he would smother the residents and rob from them. And he got away with this for a long time. He was later convicted, I believe, of 22 murders. Yeah. And they know that there was many, many more. So the families got together and created something called Secure Our Seniors, and one of those family members is a member of TFRW, and she had been speaking to our clubs around the DFW area, and everybody would hear the story and be like, TFRW's got to be involved in this, because they'd had a little success last session, got a couple things passed, but the big meat and potato stuff they hadn't gotten done. Mm-hmm. And so I looked into it and I went, wow, this isn't really a Democrat or Republican issue. This is just a humanitarian thing. Mm-hmm. We take care of our kids. Why aren't we taking care of our senior citizens? And so we were able to work with them this session to get this bill passed that's, I think, pretty standard and benign, in that you got to have background checks on folks who work there.
That seems like the most practical, the most common sense solution
right?
ever. Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? Mm-hmm. You have to allow your residents to speak to law enforcement. One of the problems that was going on when they were investigating this is they weren't quite sure what was happening. Was it a crime? Was something happening? And when the police would try to go speak to the residents, unless they had a warrant, they would not let them speak to the residents. So now,
even as like an investigation into a murder? Even as an
investigation, yeah.
That's insane.
Because, so now you have to let the police speak to the residents.
Again, a very common sense.
Pretty easy. And the other thing is let residents know when there's been a crime on the property. These facilities knew there had been robberies, but never let the residents know that there had been robberies. So they didn't know to be a little more vigilant, or not necessarily answer the door to everybody. So we're thrilled that it got through, and we're going to be able to help a whole population of folks that.
See, I thought you were going to say that this was allowing seniors to conceal carry, or in the facilities.
Now,
it was my mom.
We might be tackling that one next session. You
if
never know.
It's so hard to pass these common sense.
Don't threaten her with a good time.
I'm telling you.
And to your point earlier, was this a bipartisan effort?
It was bipartisan.
Republicans and Democrats to agree on this.
It was a bipartisan effort. Tan Parker originally carried it out of the Senate. It was unanimously passed in the Senate, and then it was bipartisan carried in the House. And
so looking forward, Derek doesn't care about the special session, so it's somebody else's problem around here. Yeah. So I'll just ask you anything you're looking at in terms of the special session, and anything your TFRW is gearing up for.
Well, certainly we're going to be all over the Women's Privacy Act. I mean, that was something we did put out action alerts on. Our ladies called on. We did everything possible to get a hearing in the House on that one. We want it passed. Yeah. We deserve to have private spaces.
Yes.
I mean, come on, This, again, one of those things I can't believe we're having to pass this, kind of like we had to pass a definition of a woman this session, right?
Yeah.
We'll
Shout out to Ellen Chalks-Claire.
Yeah, I got to love. Okay. Ellen is actually our House representative.
Like your key House representative.
On our state board. So we love us some Ellen. So yes, that will definitely be one, and I think the other one will be STAAR. Getting rid of STAAR. Nobody likes STAAR. Everybody hates STAAR. I literally have never met a person who thinks STAAR is a good thing. It was a good bill that passed that they couldn't just get the fine out things worked out on. It was kind of down to, will the SBOE be in charge? Will the TEA be in charge? I tend to fall on the SBOE be in charge because I can vote them in and out, right? But, we want to do right by our kids in Texas, and STAAR test isn't it.
Yeah.
And
do y'all have a position on what kind of measurement needs, what the structure of what that looks like?
What it looks like, definitely the map testing.
Okay.
That's what most private schools use, and it's we look at it over the entire year. They get tested 3 times a year. So we know if they're learning. Have they lost learning, where they're at? It's not a high stakes test. They get the results fairly quickly. So you're not waiting until next year for them. So those are 2 that right now I know that we'll be definitely in favor for, and then we'll see what else what comes up.
We gave a shout out to Representative Troxclair, and this is something I've just watched in my time in Texas politics, but there's a very strong contingent of female activists, then turned politicians, leaders throughout the state. In fact, I've worked in probably a dozen or more states politically throughout the country, and I just have never seen the kind of leadership from women activists that there really is in Texas. I worked on the Cruz campaign, and there was a narrative amongst the Cruz campaign that he wouldn't have been a senator if it wasn't for the for women activists getting up and pushing his nomination. And then of course the great Kay Goolsbee was a big part of that I'm sure everybody remembers.
Love me some Kay Goolsbee. Yeah.
Do you think there's something about Texas that foments activism from our women here?
I think so. I think obviously Texas women are strong women, and we don't take a back seat to anybody. So I think there's just that Texas resilience. But I gotta give us a little bit of credit within the Texas Federation of Republican Women. We've got 10,000 members across 160 clubs across the state of Texas, and our objectives are to elect female Republicans, and to develop Republican candidates. And 2 members of the House right now are graduates of our candidate development school. 1 member of the House is a former executive board member of TFRW. 1 member of the House is former president of a TFRW club. So, I want to give us a little kind of pat on the back
100%.
for out there working.
I wouldn't sell you short on the activism policy side too.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely if you know that TFRW is behind you on a particular issue, that's like the first call is to say, hey, how can we get ginned up and let everybody know, educate the public on these issues? Can folks, you guys are so good about inviting our experts to come in and talk and educate your members on this, and then showing up on that the days for the hearings and things like that. I mean, TFRW on the policy side is really a force to be reckoned with as well, I'm sure, due to your leadership.
Oh, well, that's kind. Thank you. But yeah, so listen, when our ladies get behind something, they're behind something. And I know earlier this year I called one of the chairmen of one of the committees, and I said, hey, we really want to get a hearing on this bill, and what can I do to get it done? And she's like, we'll make sure it gets on there. My phone can't take all the phone calls. I'll make sure it gets on there. So when our ladies get behind something, they're behind something.
And then looking forward, and this is really more into Derek's ballywick here, but looking forward into the 90th, are there things that didn't get done in, 2 questions. Are there things that didn't get done in the 89th that you guys are putting back on the agenda that's going to be a big push? And then are there things that are springing up now? Are there new issues that have come to light, which you're going to start developing and looking forward to pursuing in the 90th?
Well, good question. So I think energy will continue to be something we are championing. But, we elect new officers every 2 years, and that election will occur this October. And then that group of executive officers will meet again and start talking about what they want to focus on for the next session. So we'll see what the next set of officers are concerned about, what pops up. Things seem to pop up in between sessions that we hadn't thought of. We'll
Derek's leading that process for us right now. Anything surprising and during our process that you see that maybe is not an issue on anybody's radar right now that you could give somebody a preview on?
Well, I can say for a fact that, without going too much in detail how we do this internally, we basically have submissions from all across the foundation. I just got them all tabulated and everything. We had about 318 that we need to winnow down to a, thing that are actionable and coherent for Brian to talk about. I did see a lot of getting state resources, specifically State of Texas resources out of any sort of public broadcasting. Had several on that, and of course I was like always like, oh, why do you want to shut up Ira Glass? You have that idea at first, and then just yesterday, almost providentially, I go over to NPR's website. Someone pointed me towards an article that said, I went on a date with my AI dream guy and cried over shrimp. And I was like, this is worse than the article we had last week with the I am a clown, Trump's not one of us one.
Yeah, right.
And so I read this whole article, and at the end it ends with her saying that she's not going on any more AI dates, and that she was telling this to her AI therapist who said it was okay. And I was like, we did not need to pay for this. And so that was some of them. We do see a lot. I'd have to say that even with what was done this session, a lot of what we've seen in our process has been water. Yeah. And we have folks here that are, like we have at least one person who is a full-time water person, and these weren't all from him. Yeah. So we had a lot of folks highlighting some of the issues with water and some of the property issues surrounding that as well.
Yeah. I was going to piggyback on that a little bit. It's interesting when you look at, as us being a statewide organization, is I have my West Texas ladies. They're very concerned about water because they're running out in West Texas.
Absolutely.
Then I have my East Texas ladies who are saying, you're not taking my land to build reservoirs. So it's kind of a divisive issue, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. And we're going to have hard conversations because it's something we got to take care of in Texas.
In fact, they're having those hard conversations right now. But maybe not right now. I don't know what the state of the hearing was when I came. But I know yesterday they had one of the interim hearings on the water use. And your observation is exactly correct. In fact, I remember towards the end of session, when a lot of our folks are busy, but there is a meeting, oftentimes with a Republican Women's Club. They'll ask for someone, and I'm the only one without a hearing to go to. So I did that for the gals in Midland, and that was, 2 weeks? 2 weeks after they had like a pretty close call, because they basically have two major conduits on the way into Midland. One of them was down, and the other one capacity was severely limited, and it became one of the things where you twist the spigot and nothing comes out. And that is we'll say that is a very sobering experience for people. And so that was all the talk of that particular meeting. Well, that and gambling, they really want to hear about gambling. But that being said, is they had the more proximate experience with the water issue. And that is, and when you hear some of their stories, even though nobody was, hurt or anything like that, it's something that people grasp the severity of. Yeah.
Jill, have y'all talked about the gambling issue? Or is that too much of a lightning rod? You stay away from that one?
I'll be honest. We haven't talked a lot about it, but just based on, the rumblings of hearing my members, they're not necessarily in favor of it.
Yeah. That's what we're seeing too.
Yeah, they're not necessarily in favor of it. And I personally think it's something we need to be a little concerned about, because it could turn Texas blue is my concern.
Yeah. Well, we've, one of the concerns we hear is, and this goes back to like what it means to be Texas, and that if the argument is always, well, this is going to raise a bunch of money, the counter argument is, isn't there a more Texas way we could raise a bunch of money? Like if, it's going to raise even our calculations were high.
$824 million a year.
And it's like, can you go to the energy industry and you can shake the couch cushions and find $800 million? Like, isn't there a more Texas way that we could raise this money? If it's really about money, could we do that without allowing in all this other,
I agree.
Stuff?
Personally, I just see an element of, crime that comes with it.
Absolutely.
Certainly, one of the things that I don't particularly care for in this bill, or what they're talking about, is that we pick winners and losers. Why does Dallas get to get one? Why can't, Rising Star Texas have one?
Yeah, right.
I don't particularly care for that. So, I just, it's one that I think we need to be kind of careful with.
Well, far be it from me to promote my own product, but no,
we didn't do a shameless plug, so this is it.
I will take the shameless plug. No, we studied this. Our research department studied this, probably right at the end of last year, if I recall correctly. And your misgivings are are manifest in the places that have done this. Ohio just being one. We kind of did an extrapolative experience from that. And yeah, the money is nothing to sneeze at. But again, they're talking about using this to quote unquote fully fund our schools. And if you actually go by instructional hour, it'll get you halfway through the first day. That's how much money we're talking about generating. Not even, we're not talking about, setting the funding aside for all the Taj Mahals and all that stuff. What we're talking about is basically keeping the lights on the lunch. And that's what I think a lot of folks fail to grasp the scale of, especially when it is compared to the well-substantiated social issues that come along with it.
Yep. Absolutely. And then, of course, we were told that the lottery was going to fully fund schools, right? We've seen how that worked out.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, speaking of people that had a bad session. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of good ideas, let me throw you this one. This is my idea that everyone hates, but I'm hoping that I can maybe get you on my side and maybe I can come in and lobby the TFRW. I hate our committee process. I do not give Congress high marks for anything, but the fact that their committee process where they have experts come in or invited testimony from people that they need to hear from, stakeholders or whoever, or even just people to come in and tell their stories, there's a process by which they come in and they get the information that they need and then they use that to consider changes in the bill and whatever. Our committee process is a nightmare where anyone can dress up like Dracula or Little Bo Peep or whatever, and then the members have to sit there and listen to 99% of the people who are not their constituents come in and say the same thing over and over again. It's this horrible process. And there are a lot of people that come in that have a good story to tell or that have a unique opinion on something. And I think they're just completely drowned out by the nonsense and the craziness. But as someone who is very close to the activists, and this is a lot of what you do is try to get people to show up and show support for these issues or give their opinions. What do you think about the way our process works, and would you come on board with me and start making it better?
Or me and take the right answer.
The right answer. I think I have a little bit of both, because I don't disagree with you. I think that there are. I know that personally, if I was having to sit up there and hear the same thing over and over again, I'd be like, okay, I got it. I don't need to hear it again, right? At the same time, right?
Here we go.
Everybody should have their voice heard, right?
So I agree with that.
Even Dracula and Little Bo Peep,
but
Brian.
I gotta say, that when I saw the drag queens at the Capitol, I was thinking, man, Stephen F. Austin is rolling over in his grave. This is where it's happening.
That's a fair observation.
So I think there's a happy middle we can find.
I do think everyone should have their voice, but you want to dress up like Dracula, you have to go to your member's office. That's what happens in Congress, is that your voice is to your member of Congress, and you want to, say crazy stuff or tell them the same thing 100 times. That's where you get your voice heard, is that you go to your member of Congress and you sit down with them and you talk to them about it. You don't take everybody's time at the committee, which is the part where everybody's supposed to be learning about what's going on in the world and figuring out how to change the bill or add the bill or whether or not they even support the bill.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's a happy medium between the two, because for sure, I know I've sat through, let's talk about the school choice bill, right? That was 24 hours. And you heard the same thing over and over again.
Even from the good guys, right?
Right? How many times can you hear the same thing over and over again? So,
and God bless Brad Buckley for doing that.
God bless Brad Buckley. I'm telling you, he's a champion. I'm telling you, he's great.
And frankly, Senator Creighton, I mean, he went through the same thing too.
He went
over
through
there,
the same thing, yeah.
And all of them were fantastic. Well, Jill, thank you so much for being here. We do something at the end of the show called the 10-minute drill, where we go through 3 different segments. We'd love for you to stay, and you can offer your thoughts on these topics if we get into them. And these will be things that you'll be interested in anyway. So if you'll stay with us, we'll say goodbye to you at the end of the show instead of right now. All right, survey says. So we go through polling, and we always look at there's some new polling that's out there. This is something I thought was interesting, just because we are coming into sort of the silly season and midterms and what's affecting it and what's not. The good news is 42% of Americans say that their personal finances are excellent or good, while just 21% say that it's poor. And the number I wanted to highlight is that even 36% of Democrats rate their finances as good or excellent. Only 27% say poor. And so that's something that pollsters always look at as kind of the barometer for how the midterms are going to go, particularly when you change an administration administration from one White House to the other. It's really this issue of personal finances and how you're doing individually really dictate what's going to happen in the next election. Derek, does it surprise you that a plurality think that they're good, and even a plurality of good Democrats, do they even think that things are going well?
No, I don't think that surprises me at all. In fact, if you look at just kind of some of the economic decisions that the current administration, the Trump administration, has made, I mean, other than the willful walking or doddering around and stepping on rakes that the Biden administration had, at least vis-a-vis the economy, the Trump administration could basically almost come in and do nothing and by default produce better economic outcomes. I mean, we're not sitting here and putting a $3 trillion transfusion into the economy under the auspices of somehow reducing inflation, which I was about to say that didn't clear the parliamentarian, but all this other stuff got caught.
Yeah.
Or that cleared the parliamentarian, all this other stuff got caught. But, just like we were talking about with EJ last week, there are still vulnerabilities in the economy. And while these top lines are good for the prospects of Trump and conservatives going forward, I still do fear some of those things, so that those chickens could come home to roost. But that being said, is if even Democrats are reporting being above water in terms of their own personal household finances, that might be a soul-searching moment when they have to check the other box or vote party line on some things, and they might be open to even entertaining maybe a little two-party ballot.
Yeah. Jill, last week we had an economist on from Heritage Foundation. He told us all the numbers are moving in the right direction. The tariffs aren't really hurting, prices. We saw a little bit of inflation this month. But a lot of times the numbers don't really reflect what people are feeling on the ground. That's your job, is to know what's going on the ground. Do you think that people are starting to, do you think that people feel that the economy is moving in the right direction, or are people still really worried about the direction?
No, I think people are happy. I think people are like, and I even think people who were not Trump supporters are going, I got a little more money in this month, and my groceries aren't quite as expensive as they were. I mean, I think there's people that they're looking at it and going, maybe he's not such a bad guy after all. Maybe these policies actually work. So I think it's a good thing.
And that's really what the tariffs is. If he's, a lot of people don't understand the whole mechanisms behind that, but they know if at the end of the day a deal's being made. And that's really his brand, is like the deal maker. So maybe they're waiting to see how the deals come out.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think people thought, we're going to have these tariffs. Oh my gosh, everything's going to get really expensive. Guess what? Nothing's happened. And so I think people are like, oh, this was much ado about nothing.
I mean, the Democrats were lighting everybody's hair on fire for nothing?
Yeah.
To be fair, I think a lot of what we are seeing in some of the macroeconomic indicators are showing is that, a lot of the trade asymmetries that Trump in many cases rightly identifies, a lot of that is being eaten by the producer side to maintain the market share. And I think that's, which again, if that means prices are level for the average American, that's great. That's what we want, especially if that's used as an incentive to come to the bargaining table. But that being said, I think that's just a bit of a different way of looking at it. But it means that the result, much to the points that we're making, is the same.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's really kind of funny is I've heard some people, are not in this world, right? We talk about this stuff all the time. That would look at the fact that such and such country, is paying this much in tariffs. But we're not. Well, that's just not fair.
Right.
Like literally, they were like, "Well, wait a minute, this is actually evening out the playing field," So
and Trump's such a good communicator on that level.
Yeah.
He understands the fairness issue and cuts right to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good. Well, my New Year's resolution was to believe people when they tell you what they think, and so I'm going to believe people that they are starting to feel it or see it, and that things are moving in the right direction. So I'll be less pessimistic, at least through the end of the year, maybe. All right. Second second segment is lies, damn lies, and statistics. I thought this was interesting. I always like bringing this up just because maybe it's just kind of spiking the ball. But in U.S. News and World Report came out with their best state economies. Unfortunately, Texas is not number one. Texas is number two. I know, but our friends in Florida are number one. So
we got to let someone else win from time
every
to time.
Once in a while.
Yeah.
You know how your mom was like, let your little brother win at Mario Kart? This is the same thing.
Yeah.
This looks at, and this is one of those things where they rank, a lot of times these rankings, especially when Texas is at the bottom of something, it's always like because we're not woke enough or because we don't have enough indoctrination going on in our schools. This actually looked at business environment, labor market, and overall economic growth. Texas gets very high marks for employment and growth because everybody's moving here and we're creating jobs and winning governor's cups and all those things. So Florida was number one, then Texas, then you get Utah, Idaho, Arizona, and Colorado round out the top six. I mean, those are all very red states that have very freedom-y economies.
All but one.
Well, Colorado, right? Yeah. That's where you get your first. But then after that, it's Massachusetts was 11, New York was like 35, New Jersey's like so you get the big blue states are at the bottom.
Colorado's more like purpley libertarian.
Yeah, there's the weird social issues there. So, but again, my point, I was like bringing this one up, Jill, because I was told by reliable sources that if we were passing all this conservative legislation, like banning abortion and the gender modification and getting forcing boys to use boys' bathrooms, all that stuff, that people would be fleeing. That are what was the number? Who's the guy that always
Ray Perryman with his complete unfalsifiable hypotheses on how things work.
We lose hundreds of millions of dollars in economic output and all this stuff. Of course, none of that's true, and Texas has one of the best economies in the state. Yeah. What do you make of all that?
Again, it's a much ado about nothing. You have a bunch of really loud voices on some of these issues, and we're all going to leave, and we're going to take our stuff with us and go home, or whatever, just like a little petulant child. Mm-hmm. It hadn't happened.
Nobody goes home.
Nobody goes home. They all stay, right? So, I think it just goes to prove that conservative values, conservative policy works, even for the Democrats, because they don't want to leave here.
Yeah,
no, and people like it.
But you said the right word. It's not theoretical. It works. And so if it was theoretical, and you think, I just don't want to live in a state that has laws like this, maybe that would force people to go somewhere else. But the fact is, the laws and the policies we put in place actually make life better and more livable for parents, for entrepreneurs, for workers, for families. To build here. Anyway, so it actually works.
It works. It works. It's amazing how it works, right? And that's why I think people run around with their hair on fire. We're gonna leave town. We're leaving. And hey, there's been a couple of them that have. But bye, And we're living the Texas miracle.
That's right.
And there's a reason people want to move to Texas.
Yep.
They wouldn't come if we didn't have a reason.
All right. We already did a little bit of this. We always end with what to watch for, what's coming up. Derek's obviously not looking at the special session, so I'll ask you first.
I like how you
Derek,
make me think. Make it sound like I don't even.
That's what you said. Roll tape. Let's run it back. He's that's really Andrew's problem.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of things I say that are Andrew's problem, but
what are you watching for other than next session?
To be honest with you, I am looking, and even if you look at just the specifics of the special session, I'm really interested, and we talked a little bit about this last week, is the contours of what the state efforts in the kind of Hill Country disaster relief, both in terms of doing what we can to fix the problem that exists now, and looking forward to, how can we potentially obviate or mitigate this in the future. I think those are going to be robust discussions, but I also think they're going to be tough discussions, because there's a lot of things, much as we talked about, that you can't just throw money at and expect, that the infusion of cash is going to solve the problem. So there's going to have to be some tough discussions in that realm.
And Jill, I know you won't say it, so I will, but what to watch for? You have a big election coming up on Saturday, and so maybe we'll all be watching that to see if you get a promotion there at TFRW. So we'll keep a close eye on that. But what do you have coming up? It doesn't have to be political. It could be just your somebody's baseball game or something.
Yeah, school starts August the 11th. So that's kind of a big deal at my house.
My goodness.
My son's going to get his driver's permit next week, so that's kind of a big deal at my house too. But yeah, of course, I love session. Again, I am that political nerd, so I'm thrilled that
You're in a
session's
safe
back.
place here.
Yeah, so I'll have it back up on my computer every day, listening to all the things. And the truth is, I think there's no way they get through all these items this session.
Oh, no.
So let's see how many specials we go through, and then it's and guess what, guys? It's election time again.
Yeah, we're the silly season, as we like to say. How are you handling the first car for is I don't want to spoil anything if you've got a big plan going forward.
No big plan.
No plan.
Her son's a big listener to the
how
podcast.
but how do you handle that? I mean, handing over a car to a 16-year-old and letting them.
No,
he's. I'm a new parent, by the way, so that's why I'm.
So he's gonna get just like something off of the the lower end, something you just beat up, and that's the deal in our house, is get a good old farm truck kind of thing to drive. That's about 20 years
standard
old.
transmission.
And you can just beat the heck out of that, and then when you get ready to go to college, we'll buy you a real car. One
of my colleagues told me at lunch today that his first car was a Ford Mustang 4.6 Cobra, and I said, how did your parents allow you to have that? And I guess he grew up in rural Mississippi, so they were he knew how to drive back then or whatever. But I was like, how do you
that doesn't answer your question, Brian.
300 horsepower or whatever it is to some 16-year-old on a farm road and tell him, hey, hopefully you come back alive. But he's still with us, so apparently they trusted him. Me, I'm really, really watching this issue of taxpayer-funded lobbying, and I didn't ask you about that. I wasn't sure if that's something that you're following, but taxpayer-funded lobbying is the gateway drug for all of the problems that Texas has experienced, or all the difficulties that Texas has had in passing good legislation, including things like school choice and property tax. It really is a problem. It's up to $100 million are being spent on lobbyists. That's money that could go into your potholes, into your public safety, into your education, healthcare for your communities. We shouldn't be spending a single dime on it. Not to mention that the things that they actually lobby for is just government lobbying government for more government, which is
and against our values, and against things that we want. My gosh, some of the things that I hear TASB lobby for.
Unless you want to have another, you just open up the TASB. We can go a whole other show on that.
Actually, we have a whole new series. We have a whole other series for that with Mandy. Yeah,
that's right. But we have. I mean that. But that's how the inappropriate materials get into your libraries. That's how these this awful curriculum or whatever they're pushing in the classrooms. That's how that gets in there, is through the taxpayer-funded lobbying a gateway. So we have got to get rid of that. We have got to make sure that the money is being spent wisely in those communities, and they're not being sent to Austin to lobby on these awful things. And so we're going to pay attention to that.
I agree. And, I think one of the misconceptions about ending taxpayer-funded lobbying, is that, school districts and cities can't advocate. Yes, you can. You just do it yourself, right? So it's not as dramatic sounding as I hear some city council members and school board members with their hair on fire about, oh my gosh, nobody's going to represent us. We're going to have the world's ending. No, it means you got to have a relationship with your representatives and pick up the phone and go to Austin.
It is a deeply absurd argument to say that a state representative wouldn't take a call from the council member or a mayor on a serious issue dealing with their communities. And the representatives, frankly, that we've talked to feel very offended that that's the pushback, is that, they won't talk to us unless we hire some high-priced Austin lobbyist to go in there. The real reason they do it, since you brought it up, and that's such a good point, the real reason they hire them is not because they can't get people on the phone. It's because there's no transparency around how the money is spent. So if a mayor comes to town and wants to do things and go out to eat and use travel money or whatever, all that has to end up on an expense sheet somewhere, and the public gets to know how they spent the money. If they hand it over to a lobbyist can go take everybody to a steak dinner and no one knows any different. So the reason why they want to hire the lobbyist is because it totally blocks the public from knowing how that money is spent and what happens. So anyway, again, that's another whole show that we could do for taxpayer-funded lobby. This is a lot of fun. We went over a little bit. I told you we were going to get out of here on time, and we didn't, but we had a great conversation, and we're really excited that you came and talked to us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. appreciate y'all's support of TFRW, and we look forward to working on more projects with you
Excellent.
guys.
Well, let's get you back here next year after some of these things come down, and maybe you'll have a new title at that point.
Maybe. It's possible.
To add to the long list of titles and awards that you already have. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And those of you on YouTube, thank you for watching. As I always like to say at the end of the show, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.